Welcome to The Point with Mick Rich. This week's segment, I have my good buddy, Scott Chandler, owner of Tierra Blanca Ranch down in, you have a ranch outside Deming, north of Deming?
Yeah, it's north of Deming, and then the headquarters up by Hillsboro, New Mexico.
Hillsboro, and where's Hillsboro's down there as well?
Yeah.
That neck of the woods.
Yeah, the lower end of the Gila forest. We have pretty much the southern tip of the Gila.
Oh, okay. And then you also have a ranch just outside Belen, up against the mountain?
Over by Highway 47.
Highway 47. How many acres do you have there?
Well, it generally, that's a place we lease, and so it's probably 8 sections, 10 sections, and then
10 sections,
and there's
640 acres to a section.
Yeah.
So we're talking 6,400
and then
acres.
The Terra Blanca is pretty close to 50 sections.
50 sections.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a lot of ground to cover.
A lot of. Yeah. Now, obviously, you don't do that all on horseback.
The Terra Blanca, it's pretty much primarily a horseback ranch.
Oh, is it?
But this one up here, that's kind of the key to, running these kind of ranches is, you don't want to have more than one that has a canyon on it named after Hells. And Terra Blanca actually has 2 Hells Canyons.
So, does it really?
So yeah, if you come up with, I always told my dad, because they bought this ranch back in '76, and I said, when you guys were shopping for a ranch, and you looked on there and you saw that there was Hells 1 and Hells 2, you should have known it was pretty rough. They couldn't come up with another name for it.
So what's the canyon look like? I mean, just for my sake, I just kind of curious.
Well, one of them is it's almost like the walls of your studio here, and there's about a 20-foot bottom in it that you can ride up.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's just straight up and down. And
how tall are the walls?
It ranges probably several thousand feet, from the bottom to the top.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's a deep, deep canyon. And then the other Hells 2, it's just giant boulders, and you can get down it, but it's very challenging. Yeah. A lot of brush in it too.
Oh, okay. So, easy for cattle to get lost in there.
Yeah.
Am I right?
People too.
And many people get lost in there?
Yeah. My dad, we've had to do a few search and rescue missions out there. We had to go find a group of kids one time that was lost out of Missouri in a snowstorm, and some things like that. So yeah.
My gosh.
We occasionally do that sort of thing.
Oh, I was in Boy Scouts growing up.
Yeah.
And we were doing a hike, and the dad dropped us off at a dam, said just follow the stream down, and we didn't make it to the other end. And so there we were, just out, 15 kids, 20 kids, ranging from 11 to 15, out with no tents, no back, just T-shirts.
Yeah.
Spent the night, got people a little excited.
Yeah.
And it's,
That's kind of what happened in one of these situations. I think they were overdue like 3 or 4 days from calling in. And
oh, man.
They had search and rescue out looking for them, and the gal from the hospital in Missouri, she called us, and she was, please, can you guys go look for them? I mean, they're not finding them, and the helicopters are looking. And so my dad and I went out, and about, I imagine it took us about 8 or 9 hours. We trailed them up and found them.
In one of the canyons?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. So, do you have federal or state leases as well?
There, it's all federal. We have private land. I mean, from my understanding, after Ted Turner sold his big chunk back to the forest or donated or whatever he did, we're the largest private land holder inside the national forest now of in-holdings. So we have really large chunks of private inside the national forest that controls our allotment, and then the rest of it's a federal allotment, controlled by the feds.
Right, okay.
National forest.
What you have is you got private land surrounded by federal land.
Yes.
And then surrounding you lease that land.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's we don't consider it a lease. I mean, we could spend an hour on that topic. With the allotments, as an allotment holder, we actually own our allotment, and the allotment to buy, like for instance, when my granddad and dad bought this place, they had to buy what they consider the base property. that's tied to the private land, that's tied to the allotment. And then under the law, as most people used to interpret it, I mean, we pay taxes on our improvements that are on the federal land, and like our wells and pens and that sort of thing, we depreciate them, just like they would. It's considered a split ownership. And so, when people say, well, you guys don't actually own your allotment, it's like, well, why don't you tell the IRS that? Because, we actually depreciate our property. I mean, so it's considered a split estate with the feds.
Right. Oh, I got
So,
it.
yeah, it's kind of in a different situation with the feds, because they don't like really recognizing that anymore. And,
Well, that's right, because they're out in D.C.
Yeah.
They don't want you out here.
Well, it's like you as I'm pretty sure you own your own home. I mean,
Right.
When you own your own home, you feel like you have more of a vested interest, but you
That's
also you own what your property is. So
That's
I mean,
right.
that's your property. Where if you're just a renter, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with renting a house, but it's
No,
not the
that's
same
right.
sort of scenario. And so when we're just the government would rather look at a lot of the ranchers as a renter, because then they can just kick you out.
Well, that's
Versus
right.
if you actually own your allotment and you actually have rights, that's a whole different
But that is
ball
a
of wax
whole.
for them.
But that
Yeah.
is.
And that's one of the things, maybe we're getting too far down.
But you know
we can-
what? What you're also talking about is up in southeast Oregon.
Mhm.
What was that rancher's name that had the standoff?
Yeah,
but-
they just got, and then they shot one of them, and his name's slipping
Yeah,
my
I
mind
can't
now.
remember their
Yeah.
name. My wife's
Yeah.
sister and her husband.
And there's
they
a lot
live
of
up
controversy
there.
coming out of that too. I mean, that's whether they really should have done that, and the Fed shot him, or
Oh, I tell you
it
what,
was just
it is
I mean, you talk
huge.
about a de-escalation problem. We'll let people go tear down monuments, and then these guys, I mean, they're actually standing on principles that are rooted in the law.
Right, I understand
And
that.
so, maybe not everybody agrees. It's even like with, the allotments. I know we went in and did recently a presentation to the Sierra County
Right.
commissioners, and they voted a resolution essentially reaffirming that we have water rights, and that sort of thing. And so, which came out of case law over in
Right.
Sacramento's.
Okay, so let's say you're going to do an improvement on your allotment. Do you have to get a permit through the Forest Service?
Well, generally, they would say yes, because we have what we call operating permits.
Right.
And, so we usually go in because there's like studies they do, like a NEPA or
Right.
whatever, just as a contractor, even
Right.
on certain lands, you can't just go in there and blade it up and start, building a spring or
Well,
whatever.
like anywhere.
Yeah.
I tell you
Yeah.
what, I can't do it
Yeah,
either.
so
Right.
we go in and we have to work out a plan. We work pretty hard to work with the Forest Service, but we also at the same time, we're pretty staunch on that. We actually own the improvements. For instance, if you're going to go hunting out, like on my place, and
Yeah.
you're thinking you're going to hunt on the public land. Well, if you find a set of corrals and a well, you can't just park your horses in my corral and say, well, this is federal land. I'm going to use this for my
I
horses.
got you.
I have rights to
going,
that.
Right, going back to that permitting process, I can remember I was out in Daddle, I think it was, for the water board meeting out there. And then there was question and answers of the candidates. I was there, Yvette was there, Sosi was there. And in the question, one of the ranchers brought up about the permitting process, how much permits there are, how much requirement there is, how much paperwork it was. I can remember Sosi talking about we're going to get more people in Washington to process those permits. And I remember saying, I don't think the challenge is we don't have enough employees in Washington. We have too many permits.
Yeah, and it does just get bogged down with, I mean, we've been going to DC and actually working with some of the leadership up there to try and streamline things, get, one, to just see that, we're looking at it a little differently than they do, in which, we don't want to split hairs, but let's just work together.
Right.
And so, and that has been something that I think is, even they've recognized, hey, especially through the Trump administration, I've seen a lot of streamlining.
Right. So
Seems
out of
like-
curiosity, how much time do you spend, 20, 30% on the paperwork documentation compared to, In a 40 hours, let's say a 40-hour work week, which you work, I believe, more than 40. In 40 hours in a week, how much time is spent per week on paperwork for the feds and state?
Well, I wouldn't say we spend that much time because, like we do kind of operate in a way where, we have our annual meetings where we meet with them, and then we have to update them when we're moving our pastures. Well, we don't have to. It's something that, we work together on. So I would say, 10% of our time, we're trying to make sure we're communicating with them what's going on, following our proper paperwork, and keeping things up to speed.
So I think it's probably quite surprising to the people in New Mexico and Albuquerque in the urban areas to think that a rancher like yourself and Colette are spending time having to follow through on paperwork and documentation, not just on horseback. Scott, I want to chat a little bit with you about the Tierra Blanca Ranch for Troubled Youths.
Great.
Question I have is, what in the world made you and Colette decide you want to help, troubled youths? That to me is a vocation, not a job, but a vocation. When you take that on, and you're not talking about taking on young men. I take it young men.
Yeah.
Or were there women too?
We used to have young girls too.
Yeah, young women, young men come in. We're not talking about the top of the class. We're talking kids that are struggling and parents are worried about the direction their kids are going in.
Well, to start with, growing up, my mom and dad took in just kids. I mean, not in a formal way. And it was kind of an informal thing. Even the state they had like foster kids they couldn't find a place for. They'd wind up in our house. And my mom and dad, I just grew up with our spare bedroom having somebody in it nearly all the time. And I would see these kids come in, if they couldn't place them in a foster home, they were pretty troubled.
Yeah.
And so, they would come in and, they would just do our life. And I would see these transformations. Well, I went on to college and ended up studying criminal justice. And in the process, everybody kept saying, this recidivism. And essentially, you're just going to rearrest the same guy from 13 years old till you put him away for good when he's in his 20s. And that just seemed, it was very disheartening to me, thinking that, wow, this is the process, and this is all we have to look for. And they would show whatever they did for intervention you still had the same percent, 2% might make it, something like that. Yeah. And so when I got out of college, you remember in our earlier segment, I mentioned about that group that got lost up there. Yeah. Well, they were actually up there working with troubled youth, and I had ended up, we found them in the snow up there and, helped them get rescued, but was looking at their method and what they were doing. And I remember going to my dad and telling him, you know what, we could do a lot better job at this. And because I remember what our foundation was with those other kids that they had been, bringing into our home. So I put together a program and went down to the Luna County and I figured out what it was costing to kind of keep them in jail there at the juvenile center, and knocked off like $20 a day a head, what it would cost, and said, I can do it for this, and this is what we'll be teaching them. Instead of sitting in jail watching TV, I don't think at the time they had video games in there, now they do, but we'll have them out working, teaching them things. We've already, we can have them schooled out there. And I walked out of there with 20 kids. Not literally, but a contract with 20 kids essentially. And, and those were kids, a lot of them, they weren't the top of their class at the time, but once we got them, and you found they went from F's to A's, nearly every one of them. And, we've had kids graduate from Notre Dame. We've had kids, graduate from, a lot from NMSU. Actually, just one of our young men just got commissioned as a second lieutenant. So all gamut. So that was part of that.
Right. What I'm saying about they're not at the top of class. Yeah. What I mean by that.
Yeah, they were at currently. They were at the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not right.
They had Fs, or they were in jail, or on. Some of them were in jail. We'd actually get them, or some of them actually were just. If we didn't intervene, and that's where we started working with CYFD from the beginning, and and that was the JPOs and the judges and counselors. They saw that the other methods that were going on, or the treatment as they called it, wasn't getting the same results. And
well, it isn't. And in my business, we have hired young men, and laborers that have had trouble pass, had made mistakes. Some have done time. Some have had multitude of problems, and we brought them into the company. Several of them we've run through apprenticeship programs. They're getting paid while going through the apprenticeship programs. I just sat down with one young man, great guy, and we talked about what we're going to do, how we can help him get his record expunged, and do those things. Because, Scott, I know you and Colette, you guys, it's not about dollars and cents. It's about making a difference in people's lives. And that's what you're doing. You're taking somebody, as my daughter would say, Dad, a loser isn't somebody with a past. It's somebody with no future. And you've taken somebody that has a past.
a lot of times they're the forgotten.
That's right. And you've given, the two of you have given them a future. Tell you, when I talk about, I get choked up over things like this. When we talk about making a difference in people's lives, it's not about putting a buck in a tin at the street corner. We're talking about living it, bringing them into your homes, making a difference, giving them a chance. That to me is huge. I've been to a couple events and I'm talking to these young guys and wearing cowboy hats.
Well, they made our best employees. That was one of our secrets, was we would hire them in the end, after they went and did something else, and they'd come back and they were instrumental in working with the other youths. I mean, our best employees were ones that started out with us as a 13-year-old or 15-year-old.
Yeah. So I'm talking to these two young guys. Man, these are, the epitome of strong, proud, humble at the same time. Capable. I'm talking to them at this event, and then they said, "Oh, we came on board with Scott and Colette, and I'm one of their successes." That to me,
one that they will even tell you that speaks a testament to their life.
Yeah. And I said, "Wow, this is quite remarkable."
And when you meet those guys and young ladies, most of them, I don't know if you met any of the girls, but the guys, you would go anywhere with those guys, wouldn't you?
Oh,
you would feel comfortable.
There was no doubt. It was.
I'm just really proud of our guys.
Well,
not bragging on myself. I'm just proud of those guys.
It's huge.
When you see what they've done, it's like when we just went to the commissioning of that one young man. I can't describe the feeling sitting there watching him be commissioned as a second lieutenant, that sort of thing, and know how far they came.
To know how far they came.
Yeah.
I talk with coaches. My kids played, my three oldest played competitive soccer. Talked with teachers, and they said, and I'm a firm believer of this, is the A students are A students no matter what you do. The C students, the D students, the A's and B's are going to be there. You just got to maintain. Where you can make a world difference in this life is taking a student that's a D and moving them up. But what the two of you have done is you've taken students that are F's and you've moved them into the A class.
And one of the keys you mentioned early on about like your apprentice program, that's one of our foundational things was, it helped with I'm a firm believer that's one reason why we had the academic side down so well, because they had a great portion of their day where they're working with their hands. Whether we're tiling something, they learn to tile, they learn to weld, they learn to build, they learn all these. And I know, and not every one of them go to college. Some of them went on and and learned horseshoeing trades or became welders or track hoe operators. Some of our greatest success stories down there were, a couple of them. They were the first in their family to ever graduate high school. High school. I'm not talking about college. High school, and then went on and became like a track hoe operator, making $100,000 a year.
In the construction business, it's talked about when we get together, peer groups, is the best employees to hire is a either a ranch, somebody that worked on a ranch or a farm, and that's huge. So I would imagine with your success that you were having, and the differences you were making in people's lives, I would imagine that the county, the state, national was, the two of you must have been getting awards all over the place of saying, wow, did you do any like shows where they brought you, the two of you in?
Well, we did like presentation, like the, I believe it was the New Mexico Board, School Board Association. They honored us for work for doing with our kids, and we did presentations with them. I mean, we were working with 2 different school districts, Silver City Public Schools, Deming Public Schools, and then NIH, National Institute of Health, they awarded NMSU a grant because there was so much buzz of what we were doing that they awarded a grant to send 100 kids through the program over a summer. And you know, just to really, and they were long-term tracking those kids and that sort of thing. And you know, we had a lot of local news, like Sun News, you know, Las Cruces, you know, even
so
up here.
Did the Governor Richardson give you a Citizen of the Year award?
No,
Susanna Governor Martinez say,
I wish,
have the two of you come up and
honestly,
say,
we didn't even really think about that. You know, when you're in the middle of that, you know, we were just helping kids and helping through their lives. And so, like when we get called to, you know, come and be honored, like in Luna County or in Doniana or Silver City or something like that. I mean, we were grateful, but you know, it was quickly you had to just get back to work because, you know, when you're dealing with the kind of population we were dealing with. I mean, you had to really stay focused, and you know, it's like I remember one time we were called out to, and it was the Silver City Daily Press, and they had all of our kids on, you know, out at the airport there in Silver City, and you know, people were like, "Wow, that was really cool," and I was like, "Yeah, you know," but quickly we were back to work.
That's right, and I think that's what impressed me so much about you and Colette is how humble the two of you have been and the successes that you've had. And I've gone to D.C., I've seen different politicians, and it goes to their heads.
Yeah.
And you see it over and over. That's why I'm
Senator
so
Bingaman, he got grant money for Silver City Public Schools to put their kids in the program.
Good. Program that you had put together, you and Colette. And I had asked you, boy, you must have gotten kudos and all sorts of awards from our governors, but the reality was it was completely opposite of that. I would imagine the two of you were shocked what happened.
Well, it was interesting because like we had, you know, I can probably pull up dozens and dozens of letters from district judges, from JPOs, from, you know, sector chiefs and that sort of thing, begging, you know, for resources to continue putting kids in the program because they had kids in the program. We would find some way to fund their kids that they were wanting to send. And so then they want to do more, and they wanted to do more. And so, it was interesting because under the Medicaid, we were approached by a local healthcare group back before the value options takeover. And they showed up at the ranch one day, and they were like, you know, everybody says we need to work with you guys. And so we started working with the Medicaid kids, and we had, I think it was like 16 to 20 at a time, you know, of their kids, which we were supposed to start with kind of entry-level kids, you know, at risk, they called them. Yeah. But quickly it turned into, you know, we ended up with their $1 million kid. They had already spent $1 million on this kid, sending him all over the United States, and he had washed out everywhere. And now they had nowhere to go. And they said, Scott, if you can just take him, we don't expect any results. Just, you know, we just want you to try your best. Nobody else has succeeded. We're not going to hold it against essentially your success rate. And we had success with him. And so, you know, this was actually under the Richardson administration when this started, prior to Richardson's. And then, right then, we had a transition. Richardson got elected. And, well, I don't know, you know, the whole things were flying around about pay to play and all that kind of crazy stuff. And I don't know if it was connected or not, but Value Options comes in, takes out the providers we were working with. So here we have these 16 kids or so that were Medicaid, and they hire CYFD top personnel, and they come up and they say, all right, you're not the type of model we want, even though we still had the $1 million kid. They couldn't find placements for them, and they were saying they were going to have them out of there in a week. Well, a year later, they're still working. Well, we're in the process trying to meet value options criteria. So Governor Richardson gets an appeal from Domenici and Congressman Pierce at the time saying, hey, they're trying to yank the funding from these guys. Can you work with them? And so CYFD shows up with value options, and they're trying to turn us into something we're not, which the things they have aren't being successful, and then they want to make us into that. And we're like, no, we can't do that. This is what we are. This is what makes us successful. So the governor actually appointed his secretary at CYFD and deputy secretaries to really come in and supposedly try and manage this. And this is kind of an important thing with, because a bureau chief at the time, he sets me down. He says, because we thought we were getting somewhere. They wanted to create a special program place for us.
Oh, I could just hear this.
Yeah.
We're here to help you, Scott.
Well, and I actually felt like some of the administration people were pretty sincere, and they said, there's a way we can bring this in under the CYFD umbrella and kind of make everybody work, a special designation. But when the CYFD personnel heard about it, he says, you know what, governors come and go, secretaries come and go, and deputy secretaries come and go. I'm the real power here.
Oh,
bureaucracy is the real power.
When we hear about the swamp, that's what we're talking about.
And and they essentially blackmailed the bunch, and then all of a sudden those people started going off and disappearing. Yeah. And then we were just left thrown to the wolves with and here we thought we were working in good faith, and it wasn't that way. And then next thing you know, I don't know if you even heard about me, they came up and they drove into the creek. I had to jump in and save 2 of their lives. CYFD agents, they were up there. I was warning them, you don't come up here. We've got flash flood warnings. Don't come and check the freezers, because they want to check your temperature of your freezer, stuff like that, instead of what's really substantive. And they came anyway, nearly lost their lives, nearly killed me too. And, it's that kind of bureaucracy. And, but then the governor, essentially just rolled us under the butt. But value options was the problem, and I think that was the seat where you took out good providers that were trying to help, and then you put people in there that it was about money or whatever, and it killed us.
Tell you what, I think it's about money, and it's about power, and it's about control.
Yeah.
And we see that over and over. I with a couple other, about 3 other people, started up a charter high school. Got great success with the charter school. It was recognized, by Reader's Digest, one of the top 10, schools in the country for a category. I'm not quite sure what category it was, but it got recognized of taking, and we were one of the first charter schools in Albuquerque. And it didn't take long that when we started to get some success and recognition, then all of a sudden
start throwing rocks at you.
It was more than rocks. And it didn't take long before they shut us down. And then that charter school's gone.
And that's the way, even like in our situation, that same chief, he told me, he says, nobody doubts your success rates are the best in the state, but you still have to do it our way. And I told him, I said, that's the difference between you and me. If our roles were reversed, I would be trying to figure out how I'm doing it like you, versus you trying to, put me into a square box. But, instead of trying to learn from us, which, I'm not saying we had to cure all, but when something's working, you jump in and work with it. And, and that's the thing. I told him, I said, it's not about the kids then, it is more about the power. And
it's all about the power. We see this play out over and over right now with the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah.
It is about, I have the power, and I have the power to shut you down, and I am going to raise the penalties to you so high that you can just, you're going to buckle under, and if you're not, we're going to pound you into the ground.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over. We saw it happen in Grants with the mayor in Grants, right?
Mm-hmm.
In what was it, a barber shop in Grants?
Yeah.
We're going to start raising the stakes. Or you take the restaurants, we're going to pound you into the ground. We're going to come after you with every means possible. I've been through it as well, and it's painful. But I tell you what, it's a testament of the two of you standing up. Now,
I mean, at the local level, and I want to clarify on CYFD, we had really good relations. And those people, I mean, you know, they were the ones dealing directly with the kids and placing the kids with this. I mean, CYFD was our largest client over time.
right, I understand.
You know,
right,
it's just when
like,
you get up into the swamp, and then like towards the end, like Richardson, you know, looked at it. Well, these guys, it's not worth fighting for something like this, and then you just get chucked to the wolves. And you know, and we went on our way, and you know, we just went totally private, non-funded by any of those entities, and we actually became more successful. And you know, and I think that's what, you know, that was back in 05, 06, and then you know, you have to jump a little further down the road.
Then what happened? Just real quick, we've got about 4 minutes left here.
Well, it's a pretty detailed, long story, but you know, somehow we ended up on the wrong side of Governor Martinez, and you know, we were targeted, and you know, we actually have testimony. We're working really hard to get things opened up. We actually have a lawsuit out there right now on some of the records, because we want to open up the records. We said we want the Senate, we want the people to see this, because we actually had testimony, like when we asked why was there Hummers and helicopters and everything, and they take, you know, the Chandler's parents out and put them out in the grass with the SWAT team, you know, my elderly parents. What was that all about? We had a senior guy that had been a part of that say, theater. You know, all that's for theater.
You know what, we see it over and over. And really also what it's about is about theater, but also it is about sending the message to other people. You fight the system, we're coming after you, we're coming after your kids, we're coming after your parents, we're going to burn your house to the ground, and we're going to make you knuckle under no matter what. And we've seen it with the bureaucrats, whether it's in Washington, whether it's in Santa Fe. We've seen it over and over. We've seen it with the were you aware there was a doctor in, I can't remember where it was, and he was collecting arrowheads, and the feds came after him because he had, you know, the wrong arrowhead, and they were going after him. He finally took his own life to protect his family, because he said, when I'm out of the picture, they're going to leave my family alone. The same thing happened to a doctor up in Utah. Same situation. He said, the only way to save my kids, my family, my wife, my parents, and he was the sole doctor in that community, and he took his own life just to protect his kids from the feds.
Well, and that's the sad thing about even like with our deal. You can take our name and plug your name into where they did it in whatever business you are, and they can do the same thing to you. They just, because you know, it's like they went back with some of those same characters from 05 and you know, the CYFD people, and you know, manipulate it to make it look like whatever they want. You know, they left out that they had signed agreements with us. You know, we were operating, they actually helped us design some of the initial protocols that they're burning us down for later on. But you just take whatever you are, and that's why it's important and that's why we did fight back. It wasn't about the money when we sued and to get back. You know, it was so that they couldn't do this to other people, and to shed a light on what's going on.
So Scott, we need to bring this segment to a close. I want to talk about what you finished with is, it's not just about me, it's about people out there in the state of New Mexico, across the country, that when you stand up for what you believe in and what is right, and just stand on who you are, you can be a lightning rod for those that don't like it.
You'd be kind of lonely as well.
Yes, I know that. Western movies, starting with Gary Cooper in High Noon. And I can remember as a kid watching it, and I'm thinking, why is the sheriff out there all by himself? Where's the rest of the people of the town? Why is he all alone? If the town folks came behind him and stood with him, makes it so much easier. But the reality is that people stand back and think, oh my gosh, you know, if I get involved, I'm going to be a target too. But the more of us that stand up, the stronger it is. And Scott, I look at this and I think about high noon, Gary Cooper walking, waiting for those guys to come in on the train, right?
Yeah.
High noon.
And riflemen.
Yeah, but also that's been a common theme over the years in the movie industry, whether it's Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, some of those strong characters where, standing up for what is right. Clint Eastwood was a little bit of a different character than Gary Cooper, but I love watching Clint Eastwood in those movies. But Scott, what I want to talk about isn't that it takes so much energy to be the sole one standing up and saying, this isn't right. The government is here for the people, not the people for the government. What is your, looking back at this whole thing, was it worth it to you? All the heartache that the two of you went through?
Well, somebody asked me a while back, if having the program was worth what happened to us. And I told them, when you asked me that, 3 names came to my mind of just youth that immediately I know we made a huge difference in their life. And there was so many more. And I said, even if it was just one of those 3 that I saw that we saved, I think it was worth it. What I worry about is, you see what they did to us. And, a lot of the counsel we were receiving at the time, everybody was, because, they raided us like on a Thursday, and by Tuesday they were already in court dismissing everything that they had tried to get the warrants with, so that we couldn't fight back.
Yeah.
So we had filed a lawsuit the day before the raid to try and open it up, because we found out all this stuff was being done cloak and dagger. We had no idea what they were doing behind the scenes. And so we filed a lawsuit to bring it into the light. And if we hadn't done that, they would have, when they walked in there and dismissed everything, just been like, oops, well, sorry, we're done. And so, that's you can't just walk in and carpet bomb somebody and then just like go out the exit and say, well, oh, sorry, that was unfortunate. And, the kids were gone, our reputation's ruined, all those things that, had hit us. And so, yeah, we were following through, but even then at that point, I remember, some of the advice we were getting, legal advice, they were like, you know what, just take the money you still have and do something else. If you're going to fight this, it's going to be this huge, drawn out battle that, and how they always say, you don't fight City Hall. And,
right.
But we made the decision, my family did, and said, you know what, this isn't about the money. They shouldn't be able to come in and do this to people. They shouldn't be able to, ruin people this way. And so we went after it. And amazingly, it's, we would need an hour and a half just to even get through part of the story of what we uncovered and how you do that. But yeah, it's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. And, one of the things I guess that's really challenging is, I'm not a rich guy.
Right.
And you have an asset or something. We borrowed money to do a lot of these battles, and people are like, that's crazy. And whether as a financial investment, you're probably better off going and putting that money in Vegas. But
yeah, I agree.
To get the principle, and that's what dealing with a lot of the attorneys. There's so few people now in our system. Isn't set up for people that fight for principle. And if we didn't have the ability to raise the money we did to fight the way we did, in which we actually did it on very low cost budget, because the way our attorneys worked, they're great and they were awesome. But it's still just some guy on the street, he doesn't have access to even what I did. You might just get rolled into jail and you're sitting in jail. And and I've dealt with public defenders with these kids. And, the public defenders, they may be a decent lawyer, but when you're representing 30, 40 kids that week,
right.
They're just walking in and, you see him. I mean, I don't know how many of those public defenders I walked up, and the first time I talked to him was 5 minutes before we walked into that kid's trial.
Yeah.
And so that's not the way our system's set up. And so, you know, yeah, you can really get railroaded. And that's why, you know, I said in that last segment, you just take your name and you put it, substitute it in mine in your business, and you could just be right there.
I'll tell you what, I've been there also with my business when I ran for office. It amazes me what will happen to an individual that follows a path that is for the right reasons. And again, I'm not just talking about a conservative, but this is about liberal as well, is that you're not trampling other people's rights. You're walking your path, you're following it through, and somebody doesn't like your path. And they are going to do whatever it takes. We had somebody write a negative response, you know, Google review on our company somewhere back east. Unbelievable to me. Why? Because I ran for office. You have people that are out there, but Scott.
Well, they don't want you stepping forward, and that's the thing.
And that's right.
We don't want good people, and it's, you know, and it is a challenge, whether, you know, it's politics or it's just stepping up and doing the right thing as far as, you know, a business person in the community. If, you know, you worry about, well, what's the liability if I, you know, have a cookout for somebody, and, you know, and you're like, oh my goodness,
right,
man, how can you do good things for people anymore?
That's right. So the other question, so there was two things. Would you do it again, having the Tierra Blanca Ranch for troubled use? Would you do that again? But then the second one was, looking back on it, would you have tossed in the towel, knowing today what you know?
Yes, I'd do it again. And we actually have a permanent operating agreement with CYFD right now where we can. And it's just, we're trying to get through the rest of our legal challenges that, you know, those lawsuits that we brought.
Right.
And to answer your second question, no, I wouldn't throw in the towel. I'm glad. I mean, there was times where it was getting pretty lean, and it was like, wow, man, this is a long. I mean, we settled just about a year ago, and October 11th was our 7th year anniversary, and we settled our biggest lawsuit 6 years.
It takes, oh God,
and
it's
you know,
painful.
and I actually heard that's actually pretty quick. I mean, you know, it could have, we could still be dragging on.
Yeah,
you know, and appeals if we hadn't settled and all that sort of stuff. You know, we settled, I think, a month and a half, 2 months right before our trial date last July, and which, you know, say we would have won our trial. You know, and to me, I would have preferred to have really just gone all the way through, but you know, we were looking at our resources, and say we won the trial, but then we got hit with appeals. Yeah, it's automatic, and then we would have 10 years of appeals.
That's right.
You know, and we just, as a family, didn't have the resources to fight 10 years of appeals.
And guess what? And the state knows it.
Yeah.
And this is probably the most upsetting thing to me, is that when you or I stand on what we believe in, what is right, and the other side looks at it and said, we're going to wear you down. And it's all about wearing you down.
We actually had one of their attorneys tell us that. We have more money, and I mean, he was trying to be nice about it, but he was saying, just let it go. He said, we have the money and the resources to wear you down. We'll run you out of money. That's the goal. That's the game plan.
We had some challenges up with Los Alamos Labs on a contract, and they did that exactly to us. And then when we started doing the Freedom of Information Act, that finally brought them to the table so we could sit down and talk to them.
You know what I told that attorney? I said, if it comes to that, I said, if I have to, you know, and Pete can't get paid, I said, I'll go out and pick up cans, and then I'll just fight you myself. But you know, and that's the tenacity that we have to turn it around.
Tell you what, so the gentleman that helped me get started, he gave me a job in construction to pay my way through college. Alan Bradford was from immigrant from England, came to the United States with $1 in his pocket, built a multi-million-dollar construction company, sold it to a big conglomerate, and at the end they said, we're going to call it even, you can keep your car. and no money. And he sued them. And they were going to break him. And they were going to do everything and this is the guy that taught me. And he hung in there. He sold his boat, sold the plane, sold the RV, sold everything to keep the lawsuit up. He won the multi-million-dollar he won the lawsuit against the conglomerate. Then he went after the Big 7 accounting firm. He went to court, and the judge turned to the accounting firm and said, I suggest you settle with Mr. Bradford, because you're not going to agree, you're not going to be happy with what I come up with. And Alan showed me that you stand on what's right. Scott, it's been great to have you here. We need to bring it to a wrap, but as you can tell, what's important is that you stand on principle. You stand on what you believe in right. And that doesn't mean what we're seeing today, trample over other people's rights or what they believe in. But we stand on what is right and fair. Scott, you are, and Colette are patriots in that term, and it's an honor, and I'm humbled to know you both. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it, Mick, and I'm grateful that you just even gave us the opportunity to come on and be on your show, and also thanks for getting around New Mexico. I mean, you've been one of these guys who you get out and you really put your feet to action.
Thank you very much. Scott, thank